Hello, welcome to the Haunted Storybook. Before we get to the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Story 1. The fog rolled in thicker than usual. Marian stood at the edge of the road with her suitcase, the wheels half buried in gravel. The sun had vanished hours ago, though she wasn't sure it ever truly came out. Hollowmore Valley always wore a kind of dusk on its shoulders, even at noon. The trees here grew too tall, too close, their branches forming an almost cathedral-like vault above the old road. She checked her watch. 6:17 p.m. The bus was late. Again. She adjusted her scarf and looked up the road. Then behind her. No lights. No sound. Until, a hum. A low whine. Headlights broke through the mist like eyes. The bus came. But it didn't stop. Instead, it slowed, just enough for its door to hiss open with a reluctant sigh. Marian didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag, stepped forward, and climbed aboard. Inside, the driver didn't look at her. Didn't speak. His hands gripped the wheel too tightly. His eyes stayed forward. A single pine-scented air freshener swung back and forth on the mirror like a ticking pendulum. "Is this going to Hollowmore?" she asked. The driver said nothing. But the bus moved. Marian made her way down the narrow aisle, her suitcase bumping gently against the seats. The lights above flickered, not broken, just hesitant, like they weren't quite convinced they belonged there. The bus wasn't empty, though it felt like it. A woman sat near the middle, face hidden beneath a wide hat, hands folded in her lap. An older man occupied the front row, eyes closed, lips moving silently as if in prayer. No one looked at her. No one acknowledged her presence. She chose a seat at the very back. The window beside her was fogged over, but she wiped a circle with her sleeve and pressed her face to the glass. Trees, shadows, and 1,000 secrets stared back. And then, a noise. Soft. Wet. From the seat behind her. But the back row was empty. She glanced over her shoulder. Nothing. Probably just the bus, she whispered to herself, pulling her coat tighter. Just the road. But then it came again, closer this time. Schlick. Like something dragging across vinyl. She reached for her phone, but the screen remained black. No signal. No power. It wouldn't even light up. The humming of the engine deepened. She turned her head slowly and peeked down under her seat. A child's crayon drawing was wedged in the corner. She pulled it out. The paper was damp. Smudged. The picture was of a bus, this very one, driving through trees. But the windows were blacked out. All except one, the very last row, where a small figure was drawn sitting alone. Below it, scrawled in thick red crayon. "Don't sit here after dark." Marian blinked. A cold breath ran across her neck like fingers brushing skin. She didn't move. "Too late," said a voice, barely above a whisper. Not from outside. From beneath the seat. Marian's body froze. The voice was small, childlike, but not innocent. It sounded damp. Like it had been trying to speak for hours with a mouth full of river water. She leaned forward, heart pounding now, and peered once more under the seat. Nothing. Just worn carpet and a crumpled candy wrapper. She let out a shaky breath. "You're just tired," she muttered. "You're not." She bolted upright. The bus hadn't stopped. The trees beyond the windows blurred like smeared charcoal. Every branch looked like a hand. The woman in the wide hat was now 2 rows closer. But Marian hadn't seen her move. She turned her head toward the bus window again, needing something ordinary to focus on. That's when she saw the reflection. It wasn't hers. The glass showed her body, yes, but not her face. Staring back was a young girl, pale as milk, her eyes too wide and too black. Her lips were stitched into a grin that reached both ears. Marion jerked away from the window and looked directly beside her. No one there. Back to the window, the girl was gone. But a handprint now smudged the glass. Small. Wet. Pressed against it from the inside. Driver? Marion stood, voice thin. Is this the Hollowmore line? The driver didn't turn. But the bus began to slow. The brakes moaned like something in pain. Trees parted. The headlights lit up a gravel driveway with a gate that read, Hollowmore Boarding House. EST 1872, we know who you are. The doors creaked open with a hiss. The woman in the wide hat rose. So did the man in the front row. Marion stepped off last, her suitcase following behind like a nervous child. She looked up at the boarding house as the bus groaned and drove off without a word. The house was taller than it should have been, 4 floors at least, though it was hard to tell where the roof ended and the sky began. Behind her, the forest seemed to close in, branches knitting themselves together like spiderwebs. Welcome home, said a voice behind her. She turned. It was the girl from the reflection. No longer in the glass. Standing in the shadows of the porch. Smiling without blinking. Marion's boots clicked softly against the porch's wooden slats. The girl was gone now, if she'd ever been there at all. Wind brushed her coat. The door in front of her opened without a sound. Inside, the boarding house was warmer than expected. Firelight flickered behind an old parlor door, casting long, twitching shadows across wallpaper patterned with moths and vines. The scent of lavender and old wood drifted in the air. A woman stood at the top of the staircase, half shrouded in dark. Miss Marion, is it? Her voice was slow, but not unkind. Room 4. Top of the stairs. Keep to the right. Don't open any door unless you're told to. Marion nodded, her throat dry. Thank you. The stairs creaked beneath her weight, each step protesting softly. At the top, she found room 4, a narrow wooden door, its brass knob cold and slightly sticky. Inside, the room was small but cozy. A fireplace in the corner, a writing desk beneath the window, and a bed dressed in handmade quilts. But what caught her eye was the closet. It was tall. Narrow. Its door painted a dull gray that didn't match the rest of the room. 3 iron locks ran vertically along the edge. A note hung from one. Do not open this closet. Not for any reason. Marion stared at it. Right, she whispered, setting her suitcase by the bed. Later that night, after a quiet dinner with other guests, each stranger and quieter than the last, she returned to her room. She lay in bed, covers pulled to her chin. The fire whispered, the wind sighed, and the closet. The closet tapped. Just once. She closed her eyes. Another tap. Then a soft, low voice. It's so cold in here. Marion sat upright. Who's there? No answer. She rose, tiptoed across the room, and pressed her ear to the closet door. Silence. She turned away. Then. Scrape. The sound of fingernails dragging down the inside of the door. Please let me out, the voice pleaded, muffled and young. It's been so long. I don't remember my name. Marion backed away. You're not real. The fire hissed. A key slowly turned in one of the closet's locks. On its own. Click. Marion stood frozen, eyes wide as the iron lock swiveled with a heavy click and fell to the floor with a muffled thud. The closet door didn't open. But the room felt colder now. Not the kind of chill that came from drafts or broken windows, this was a deeper cold. The kind that wrapped itself around bones and whispered into your blood. She stepped back. It's just a dream, she told herself. I'm overtired. That's all. She climbed into bed, pulling the covers tight, determined not to give in to the fear clawing at her chest. The fire had dimmed, casting long shadows that danced and swayed like they were listening. At some point, sleep took her. But it was shallow. Around midnight, she stirred. Knock knock. Her eyes snapped open. Not the closet. The door. The actual bedroom door. Another knock. Then a pause. "Miss Marion," a voice whispered. "You left the downstairs light on. That draws them in, you know." It was the housekeeper's voice. Soft. Patient. But Marion hadn't touched any lights. "I didn't," she started, voice cracking. "Best open up now," the voice said, "before they think you've invited them." The knob jiggled. Marion held her breath. Then came the slow dragging sound. Something soft brushing the hallway floor. Like long hair. Or bare feet. The knob stopped moving. Silence again. She waited, heart pounding. Then, tap tap tap, from the closet behind her. "It's warmer in your bed," whispered the voice from the closet. "I won't take up much space." Marion scrambled out of bed and threw open the door to the hallway. Empty. No housekeeper. No whispering. She turned back toward the closet. All 3 locks were now undone. But the door remained closed. At least, for now. She relocked one of them, hands trembling, and stepped back into the hall. She needed air. A moment away. Maybe even answers. The hallway stretched out before her, candlelit and empty, though every painting seemed to watch her with eyes that didn't blink. She didn't notice the shadow that followed just behind her, its shape crawling instead of walking, its face pressed to the wall like it was listening to her heartbeat. The hallway stretched impossibly long, every step echoing off walls that breathed softly with the age of the house. Marion kept close to the railing, passing closed doors that throbbed with silence, as though something behind each was pressing its ear against the wood, listening. She stopped at the end of the hall where an oil painting hung above a dusty bench. It was a portrait, once vibrant, now dulled by years. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, stood in a buttoned-up navy coat, hands behind his back, expression solemn. His eyes were pale, too pale, almost silver. The plaque beneath read, "Elias Hensley, 1902 to 1909. He still wanders." Marion stared. Something about the boy unsettled her. His gaze felt alive. Not in the metaphorical sense, she felt him see her. Then, "You're standing in my light," said a small voice. Marion's breath caught. She spun around. No one. "Please don't touch the painting," came the voice again, but softer, as though muffled through a wall. She turned back. The boy's position had changed. Now one hand was raised, palm open, facing her. "Okay," she whispered, stepping back, pulse racing. She moved quickly down the stairs. At the base, an old man was tending the fire, humming a tune so low it sounded like it came from beneath the floorboards. He glanced up. "Don't look at the portrait too long," he warned. "He remembers anyone who stares." "Who was he?" Marion asked. "Elias. The first child lost in this house. Died during the storm of '09. Except, he tapped his temple. No one ever found his body. Just the painting." "The painting? It used to show a garden. He wasn't in it at all." Then one night, the rain came heavy and hard, and there he was, standing right in the middle. "Haven't been able to paint over it since." The fire popped. "He's curious about guests," the old man continued. "But if you hear him knock, don't answer. He doesn't knock to come in. He knocks to ask you to leave." Marion left the parlor and returned to her room in silence. The closet was still locked. The bed was still warm. But on the quilt was a new wrinkle, a small, perfect handprint in the shape of a child's palm, dusted across the center of the blanket. The rain started just past midnight, slow at first, tapping gently against the high window panes like fingertips on glass. Marian lay curled under the thick quilt, eyes wide open, mind turning over the boy's voice, the shifting painting, and the handprint she hadn't touched or cleaned. "Just the wind," she whispered, as if saying it could make it true. But the wind didn't breathe like that. It came in waves now, rising, falling, accompanied by a low moan that seemed to slide along the edge of the roof, creeping closer with each pass. She turned over, facing the window. That's when she saw them. Eyes. Small, dull gleams peering from between the branches of the trees beyond the glass. Not reflections. Not stars. Too low. Too close. There were at least 6, maybe more, hovering still, unblinking. She slowly stood, moved toward the window, careful not to make a sound. The rain made the trees sway, but the eyes remained fixed, watching. Then one blinked. She jerked back. The candle on her bedside table flared up for a moment, burning twice as bright, then snuffed out. Darkness fell hard. Tap. A sound at the glass. Not a knock. A tap. Light. Delicate. Like a fingernail. Tap. She reached for the matches with trembling fingers and relit the candle. The flame flickered nervously, throwing shadows across the ceiling. The eyes outside were gone. But now there was a shape beneath the window. A small figure. Just standing. Waiting. She grabbed her coat and crept toward the hall. Downstairs again, she found the old man by the fireplace, unmoved. "You saw him," he said without looking up. "Who?" she breathed. "Elias?" The old man shook his head slowly. "No. Elias doesn't come in the rain. Rain belongs to something else." He looked up at her then, eyes pale, sad. "If the eyes blink," he said, "you still have time." "Time for what?" "To shut the curtains." She turned and ran back upstairs, heart pounding. In her room, the figure was gone, but the window had cracked slightly open. Only an inch. But enough. And there on the sill. Tiny, muddy footprints. Inside. Marian did not sleep. The candle burned low, flickering on the damp smudges left by tiny feet. At some point near dawn, the rain eased, retreating into a soft patter, but the unease remained like a film over everything. She moved slowly through the room, careful not to make a sound. The floorboards creaked under her weight, not from rot or looseness, but as if groaning awake beneath her steps. She paused beside the dresser and noticed something strange. A slip of paper. She hadn't left it there. It was folded once, resting on the corner like a forgotten note. The paper was thick and yellowed at the edges. Handwritten in an elegant, childlike scrawl. "You're the third Marian to stay in this room." Beneath it, in faded ink. "They never make it past chapter 10. Her heart thudded. "Mr. Carter," she called down the stairs, suddenly needing the company of the old man by the fire. No answer. She made her way down, each board underfoot seeming to hesitate before releasing her weight. In the parlor, the fire had gone cold. The hearth was empty. No sign of Mr. Carter. No warmth. Just ash. But on the mantel. An old photograph in a cracked silver frame. It showed the front of Stillwood Inn, before the moss, before the decay. Standing outside, 3 women. One in a traveling coat. Another with a suitcase. A third peering from behind a curtain in the upstairs window. On the back, scribbled in graphite. Marian Lee, Marian Fielding, Marian Gray. All written in the same tidy hand. Her name was Marian Gray. She looked up at the ceiling. "Mr. Carter," she called again, louder this time. "I'm in the kitchen," came the voice, but distant, strangled, like it traveled through walls. She entered the hallway, passing the crooked grandfather clock that hadn't ticked since she arrived. The kitchen door was ajar. A dim light glowed inside. She pushed it open. There was no one there. Just an old lantern on the table, its flame steady. And something else. Another note, pinned to the wood with a rusted knife. Chapter 9 begins with the floor giving way. The air in the kitchen shifted. Heavier. It pressed against Marian's skin like a wet cloth. She stared at the rusted knife pinning the note, trying to convince herself it was all some elaborate joke. But who would know what chapter she was in? Who had written the other names? She stepped back. The floor groaned. No, more than a groan. It sank. With a sudden crack, the wood beneath her feet splintered, and she fell. There was no scream, only a breathless gasp as darkness swallowed her. She landed hard on something soft and musty. Cloth. Dirt. Leaves. The lantern had fallen with her, miraculously unbroken, casting a cone of amber light across the underground room. It wasn't a cellar. It was a chamber. The walls were stone, worn and cracked, and the ceiling of wooden beams dripped with moisture. Shelves lined one side, stacked with old jars, yellowed books, and cracked dolls with missing eyes. Cobwebs wove between everything like threads of a forgotten loom. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her clothes. Something squished beneath her boot. She didn't look down. In the far corner, a door. Half-sized, like it was built for a child. Its wood was rotted at the edges, held shut with a single rusted latch. Painted on the surface, in the same pale graphite as the photo writing. Only the true Marian may enter. She backed away. "Hello?" she called. Her voice echoed too far for such a small room. Then she heard a giggle. Not ahead. Above. She looked up. From between the beams, a small face peered down. Pale. Round. Hollow-eyed. "You're the prettiest Marian," it whispered. Then it vanished into the dark. Her breathing quickened. She reached for the latch, but before she could touch it, the door opened on its own. A draft spilled out, colder than winter. Inside the doorway, stairs, spiraling down into deeper shadow. Something was waiting. She lit another match from the tin in her coat pocket and stepped through. The steps were uneven, each one lower and narrower than the last. Marian held the lantern out ahead, its glow absorbed by walls painted in streaks of mold and dust. The stairs descended far deeper than any inn's basement should have allowed, curling like the spine of something long buried. At the bottom, the air grew warmer, stale and cloyingly sweet, like perfume that had turned to rot. The room beyond was circular, with walls covered in wallpaper too elegant for such a place. It peeled in long strips, revealing more writing beneath, scrawled in graphite and ink. Names. Dozens of them. But all of them were Marian. A soft creaking drew her gaze to the center of the room. A rocking chair. Occupied. A doll sat in it, full-sized, porcelain and fabric, its face cracked down the middle. Glass eyes shimmered in the lantern light. Around it, on dusty shelves and crooked tables, were dozens more dolls, some with missing limbs, others with strange additions, extra eyes, teeth that weren't quite human. She turned slowly, and the dolls seemed to follow with their eyes. Then one of them spoke. "She never left, you know." The voice was faint, childlike, yet brittle. Marian stepped closer to the central doll. The air grew heavier, her breath thick in her lungs. "Who never left," she whispered. The doll rocked once, gently, like it had been waiting centuries to move. The first Marian. She let the inn remember her. A rustle behind her. Another doll had shifted, fallen sideways off the shelf. A tiny slip of paper fluttered out from beneath it. She picked it up. When the name is right, the story repeats. And the walls remember every word. A scraping sound came from the wallpaper behind her. Letters were forming, freshly, as though an unseen hand was still writing. She ran her fingers across her name, Marion Gray, only to find dozens of scratched-out versions beneath it. Other last names. Other scribbles. All Marions. And all of them ended with the same final word. Forgotten. The central doll tipped backward in its chair and landed with a soft thump. The room trembled, briefly, and then something behind the wall groaned like a massive door stirring in its hinges. "They're coming," the doll hissed. Marion took a step back toward the stairwell. But it was gone. Where the stairs had been, there was only solid stone. Marion's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. The walls, once covered in peeling wallpaper and names, now loomed close, unyielding and cold. She ran her trembling hands over the smooth stone, desperate to find some crack, some seam, any escape. But the chamber was sealed tight. A cold breeze swept through the room, carrying with it a faint whisper. "Stay with us, Marion, forever." She spun, eyes darting over the dolls, dozens of glassy eyes fixed on her, unblinking, unyielding. The cracked porcelain doll from the rocking chair began to move again, slow and deliberate, its joints creaking like ancient wood. "Join the story," it said, voice fragile yet filled with terrible resolve. Marion stumbled back until her fingers found the rusted latch of the half-size door. It was unlocked, but the door still refused to open. Frantically, she pulled at it, her nails scraping raw against the wood. The whispering grew louder, voices overlapping, hundreds of Marions trapped in endless cycles of forgotten time. The floor beneath her feet trembled and split with a deafening crack, and a hand, pale and delicate, shot out from the darkness, grabbing her ankle. She yanked free, heart hammering. "Don't leave," the voice pleaded, desperate and broken. Marion's breath caught in her throat. Tears blurred her vision. The chill wrapped tighter, but so did her will. She pulled from her pocket the crumpled drawing, the child's crayon warning. She tore it in two, whispering, "No more chapters. No more stories." The doll's eyes flickered, some dimming, others shattering with the sound of breaking glass. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the narrow spiral staircase. She didn't hesitate. Marion climbed. Each step carried her farther from the nightmare below. When she finally pushed through the last door at the top, the dawn was breaking. The fog had lifted. Outside, Hollowmore Valley breathed a long, slow sigh. Marion looked back once, but the boarding house was gone, just trees and morning light where darkness had been. She walked down the road, suitcase in hand, free at last. But in her pocket, the other half of the torn drawing still pulsed faintly warm. A warning. A reminder. Some stories never end. Story 2. The rain began in the late afternoon, soft and insistent, tapping against the windows of the old lighthouse perched on Blackwater Point. Simon had arrived just before the storm, carrying his duffel bag and a nervous smile. He'd agreed to watch the lighthouse while the caretaker took a brief leave, 3 nights alone, just him and the crashing sea. The building was ancient, its white paint peeling like dried skin, the iron railing rusted and jagged. Inside, the scent of salt and mildew clung to every surface, mixing with something deeper, old wood, cold stone, and a faint trace of smoke. Simon switched on the lantern by the door, its flame flickering and casting long shadows that danced on the walls. The first night was uneventful. The waves hammered against the rocks, a constant roar beneath the howling wind. Simon settled into the keeper's routine, checking the lamp, logging the hours, fixing the small stove that barely kept the chill at bay. Outside, the lighthouse beam swept slowly across the fog, a guardian's eye piercing the darkness. But the second night, things shifted. At midnight, the storm worsened. Lightning cracked the sky in furious white streaks, and the wind screamed like a banshee through the broken window panes. Simon sat near the fire, the lantern's light flickering uncertainly. That's when he heard it. A faint tapping, rhythmic and slow, coming from the spiral staircase that led up to the lantern room. "Hello?" Simon called, voice thin, swallowed by the storm. Only silence answered, save for the tapping, tapping, tapping. He grabbed a flashlight and climbed the narrow stairs, heart pounding. Each step groaned beneath his weight. At the top, the door to the lantern room was cracked open, revealing nothing but blackness and the wild storm raging outside. He stepped inside. The great Fresnel lens stood still, dark and cold. No flame. No light. The lantern, the source of the lighthouse's power, was missing. "Impossible," Simon muttered. "I checked it earlier." A cold breeze swept through the room, carrying a whisper. "Light, lost." Simon shivered, turning to leave, but the door slammed shut behind him. He pushed frantically. Locked. Breath ragged, he looked around. On the floor, a circle of salt crystals glowed faintly, surrounding a small wooden box carved with strange symbols. His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside lay an old, tarnished key and a folded note. "To light the lantern is to bind the past. Do you dare call their names?" Simon's eyes darted around. The air thickened, shadows deepening, as ghostly figures began to materialize, faint outlines of sailors long lost at sea, faces twisted in sorrow and rage. They reached out, whispers rising to a desperate crescendo. "We wait for the light. We wait for release." Simon's mind spun. The legend said the lighthouse was cursed, the flame kept alive by sacrifices, souls trapped in eternal night. He clutched the key and made his way down the stairs, the spirits following, moaning. Outside, the storm battered the cliffs, waves crashing higher than ever. Simon reached the cellar beneath the lighthouse, a forgotten chamber where the old oil lamps and ancient tomes were kept. In the corner, an iron chest stood locked. He used the key. The lid creaked open, revealing a single, glowing lantern. The spirits' voices rose in hope and despair. Simon took the lantern, feeling its warmth seep into his hands. With trembling steps, he climbed to the top again, placing the lantern inside the Fresnel lens housing. As he struck a match, the flame flickered to life, bursting into a brilliant light that swept across the dark waters. The spirits' faces softened, smiles touching their lips as one by one, they faded, released at last. The storm calmed, the rain easing to a gentle patter. Simon sank to the floor, exhaustion overwhelming him. When dawn broke, the keeper arrived, finding Simon asleep by the lantern, safe but changed, his eyes holding a new, haunted light. Outside, the sea whispered its ancient secrets, and the lighthouse stood proud, its last light burning for those lost, and those who remembered. Story 3. The village of Dunmere was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the skin like damp fog. At its edge stood an ancient willow tree, gnarled and sprawling, its branches sweeping low to brush the ground like fingers searching for something lost. Evelyn arrived at Dunmere with a purpose. She'd inherited her grandmother's old cottage, a faded brick house nestled near the willow's roots. The letter that came weeks ago was simple, no signature, just a single line scrawled in tight handwriting. "Come home before the willow whispers your name." The day she arrived, the sky hung heavy with slate-gray clouds. Evelyn carried her bags through the twisting lanes, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves. The villagers watched her silently from shuttered windows, their eyes dark and wary. Inside the cottage, dust motes floated like tiny ghosts in shafts of weak sunlight. The fireplace held ashes cold for years. On the mantel, a cracked photo showed a smiling girl beneath the willow, her grandmother, young and radiant, standing with a man Evelyn didn't recognize. That night, a soft rustling woke her. Outside, the willow's branches scraped against the windowpane, sounding like fingernails. She pulled the curtains tighter, heart racing. But the whispers came soon after, soft, barely audible murmurs drifting in from the willow. Evelyn. She shook her head, telling herself it was the wind, or her imagination. The next day, she explored the village. At the local inn, the barkeep's eyes darkened when she mentioned her grandmother. Best stay away from the willow after dusk, he warned. It's not just a tree. It's a keeper of secrets. That evening, as the sun bled red behind the hills, Evelyn wandered toward the willow. The village seemed to hold its breath. Beneath the branches, she found a small, weathered box half buried in roots. Inside were yellowed letters tied with faded ribbon. One letter bore her grandmother's handwriting. The willow remembers those who listen. It holds their voices, their pain. Beware the whispers. As night fell, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Evelyn, come closer. Drawn by something she couldn't resist, she stepped beneath the boughs. The air thickened, shadows pooling at her feet. Shapes flickered among the branches, faces twisted in sorrow, mouths moving silently. A hand, pale and thin, reached out from the trunk, brushing her wrist. She gasped and stumbled back, heart pounding. The willow's roots writhed like serpents, twisting to block her path. Stay, the voices urged, cold and pleading. Stay with us. Terrified, Evelyn ran, the willow's whispers chasing her into the village. That night, she dreamt of her grandmother, trapped beneath the willow, eyes wide with fear. The next morning, Evelyn found the box gone from the roots, replaced by a small, silver key with an engraving. Unlock the past. Determined, she searched the cottage and uncovered a hidden door beneath the floorboards. The key fit. Below was a narrow stone stairway descending into darkness. With only a candle, she descended. The walls were lined with names, villagers lost to time, all etched beside the willow's twisted symbol. At the bottom, a chamber filled with old belongings, photos, trinkets, and journals, all belonging to those who vanished. A whisper brushed past her ear. You listen, you remember. You belong now. Suddenly, the candle flickered out. Darkness swallowed her whole. Evelyn's scream was lost beneath the willow's rustling leaves.